Do you guys want to hear a tragedy? Earlier today, after a panel, I peed, and I had to. You have to take the strap off to pee, right? Because I can't pee through my pants. So I took the strap off and I sat down to pee, and the strap went in the toilet, and I peed on it. But I cleaned it.
She says she did.
I did. It was really embarrassing. I cleaned it in the bathroom sink. I had my overalls half off in the bathroom sink, and I was cleaning it in the sink. It smells fine. Smell. This was the pee strap. It smells
I
fine.
can't smell it from here, for what it's worth, but
it's fine, guys. It happens.
Can you see the stain?
It's not stained. Bro, what am I gonna do? You're on the front page, right? I have to think about my notes.
Okay, I have another hard question for you. Maybe, or maybe not. Maybe it's just a thought. You and I both live in states that have made a lot of money off of the oil and gas industry.
Yeehaw.
How do we get them to go renewable?
I don't know. I don't know them. Do you know?
I don't know. It was a topic that was talked about a little bit today.
How do we get them to go what?
How do we switch to renewable energy, especially when our economies are dependent and built upon fossil fuel industry?
Follow the money.
Follow the money.
Here's the thing, and here's the. Eric and I have had a lot of conversations this weekend because we're around a lot of corporate. My notes don't sync. It's an app on my iPad. Eric and I have had a lot. Can I eat a piece of your ice?
Yeah. Chaotic.
It's like the.
I told you the ice is cool. They use two different types of ice.
Thanks. Eric and I have had a lot of conversations today because this is a very This is a very corporate conference. The people that I've met at this conference. Who was that guy that we met today? He was a lawyer? What was he?
Okay.
I did something really embarrassing today. Continue. What is I didn't tell you that.
He was an environmental lawyer, but he was trying to switch into human rights law, with international human rights violations. It was very heavy stuff. I wasn't ready for it in that moment.
Oh yeah, he did just say that.
Yeah.
Here's what happened. He sat down. He sat down. He was like, "What are your names?" We shook hands. And I was like, "Oh, I got an animal sanctuary." She was like, "I do this," and then he was like, "Yeah, I'm doing this," and it's really tragic what's happening to these people. And we're like, "Oh yeah." No, I did a really embarrassing thing because he asked for our LinkedIn's, and I was like, "Ooh." I was like, I have every other platform, every other one, but I'm not on LinkedIn. And so he was like, "Oh, you can follow each other on Instagram." And so what I did is I gave him my phone with my Instagram on it, thinking that he was going to see my username and then type it in to his phone. But he gave his phone to you so you could put in his LinkedIn. So I handed him my phone, and then he took Erica's phone, and then he just started scrolling my Instagram like I was trying to do a show and tell of my Instagram.
He really was looking at
through
your
my Instagram page
because
I think that's what he thought I was trying to get him to do. Because I just handed him my.
I don't think that's what. I think he was I think he was gonna just look at yours and then. Oh. Maybe did he go and find himself and follow himself?
But not until after he did a show and tell.
I'm sure he was like, "Oh shoot, who is this girl?"
Maybe. I was just really embarrassing. I felt it looked like I was trying to get him to "Oh, look at my Instagram." And it's not. I was just trying to show him my username. Anyway, this is a very corporate conference. So we've met environmental lawyers. We've met people from Kraft Heinz, from Pepsi, from WWF, from NOAA, whatever. Just lots of corporate folks. And one thing that's confusing about conservation is how much consumers matter and how much people that aren't involved in policy and corporations matter. And Eric and I have had a bunch of conversations about that because I've heard a lot of talk this conference about how consumer choice isn't what we're relying on, like it's not going to change the world, which I understand to an extent, but then it's also kind of demoralizing to be like, well then what should I quit? like what am I doing? I thought that was a firefly. Bummer. There's a freaking plane. I forgot where I was going. What were we talking about before? Oh, because following the money is, at the end of the day, like the Rainforest Alliance certified steel, for example, right, is only matters to producers if there are people like you guys that recognize the seal, care about it, and look for it in store. Otherwise, there's absolutely no incentive to switch to more sustainable practices when they're going to lose so much money short term. Long term, great, but not a lot of producers have the ability or the privilege to see that far ahead. So I think it matters a ton there. And then the other thing is, I went to a panel where there was a Dr. Pepper rep. You guys know how I feel about Dr. Pepper. I love Dr. Pepper. And somebody asked her, like, if they want to go back to their companies, this will come back to your question. If they want to go back to their companies and convince them to get involved in something like a Rainforest Alliance certified seal or like something sustainable, what is the metric that you bring them? Like, how do you convince them that this matters? And she said that Dr. Pepper has public sustainability goals that are on their website, that are like listed on their website, they're described, and it matters to the company to fulfill those goals. There's an accountability mechanism there. But again, the only reason that Dr. Pepper is getting involved in any of these sustainability initiatives, no offense Dr. Pepper, is not because Dr. Pepper cares about saving trees and orangutans. It's because they care about what their consumers care about, so they make more money, because that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
So I think the answer is the same for oil and gas companies. Oil and gas companies don't have consumers that care about the brand in the way that CPG companies' consumers care. So my very, very roundabout answer is, I think that's the concept, but I don't know how those companies work. Did that make any sense to you guys?
I feel like that makes a lot of sense. I do think you also hit a good point on like who are companies listening to and consume. I've never heard that acronym, but that makes sense. CPG. CPG companies are listening to like individual consumers like you and me and all of you. And whereas like an oil and gas company, I mean, ultimately we are still the consumers, like we're putting gas in our cars. But they're perhaps shareholders, ones who are making money off of them, are perhaps a little bit louder because we're not really thinking too hard. We're not really yelling at like Chevron and Shell when we put gas into our cars, but we are like yelling at, I don't know, Pepsi when we realize like all their bottles are like floating on to our beaches. I don't know where I was going with that. Where I was going with that is that perhaps the other aspect that's impacting oil and gas companies, but also like if you follow the money in insurance industry, you see that climate change is actually very real, and the resilience aspect is very real, because at the end of the day, like there's finite resources on this planet, and if we use them all up, then what's there to do? Like there's always going to be more technical engineering that we can do to like drill deeper, but that exposes a company to more risk and more potential failure, and therefore potential like revenue loss. And if they can reinvest, like diversify their own portfolio, not just explore oil and natural gas, but then also start to explore renewable energy themselves, like Shell, Chevron, whatever, BP, they can all get into the renewable energy game and like overtake solar. They have the infrastructure and governance to do that, but they just need to see the business perspective, I suppose, and also hear from consumers.
My like very cynical perspective is I love the idea that you can tell a corporation that, hey, if we don't change it now, we're not going to have a company in 20 years, 30 years, because like natural resources are limited. And I just don't trust them to care enough about that or believe it, because they'll be like, well, I'll be retired by then. Like, they just don't, they're not going to care enough. They just want to make as much money as possible now.
Yeah.
So I think what is more powerful is consumers caring about it. So they'll be like, oh shit, if people are going to be mad that we're not doing this, then I'm going to lose money. So we need to do this.
Yeah. And that matters. If I may make a plea, though, when we're shouting out at companies, shout at the right people within companies. I heard of this like environmental activists that were protesting like a sustainability conference, and sitting outside of a sustainability conference, not allowing people to go in, and like following the chief sustainability officers around. Like, those are the people. I agree that like generally even corporate sustainability could be doing a lot more, but those are the people that are trying to make change within organizations. Like the people because organizations aren't just like black boxes. Like, organizations are made of people themselves. So we need to like hold the actual CEOs, CFOs accountable to, like, we need to be shouting at them. Shout at the right people. But you do hear a lot of stories, especially like in our generation and younger than us, of like kids getting interested in like climate change and in social justice and in these like really important topics, and them telling their parents about it, and then their parents actually starting to make some changes in the workplace themselves. And luckily now our generation is actually entering and starting to take a really big foothold in the working world, and we have the power to make the change. But even these like older people that are in those C-level positions, they're getting influenced just by conversations that they're having at home with kids, nieces, nephews, whoever.
People will say, like, my personal diet choices don't matter, like, they're still going to be killing animals, right? A lot of people say stuff like that, but I said this on my stream before, there's a reason that in every single grocery store ever, there's Beyond products now. Or, like, meat alternative products. Like, Beyond only exists because of the demand, because people aren't wanting to eat meat as much, or they're wanting to be vegan or whatever. The company only exists because of that demand. And they're huge. Like, Beyond is huge. It's like that is the most simple, obvious example of supply and demand curve that I can think of. It just does matter. Like, it's so frustrating hearing, Erica's heard me frustrated all day. It's so frustrating hearing people say that the consumers don't matter, and that's also me as an influencer, though. I think is I understand on a small scale that it doesn't. Hi. I understand on a small scale that it doesn't. So maybe I'm coming from a perspective of like, but I'm an influencer, so it does, because it's way bigger. Like, we're talking tens of millions a year, not just me, and not just me and my group of friends. And then also equally as frustrating that people don't understand social media yet. They don't understand the power of social media yet. They don't understand the importance of me streaming and like me filming and me it's not just that they don't understand it, they like don't like it. And that happens at every conference I go to, or like every place that I go to, you know. It's frustrating, and those are my frustrations. Thank you for listening. They get it.
I think it's great that you recognize, though, that that's like the power that you have. So, like, I don't have a social media following, nor do I don't know, it's not like my strength, but I think it's important to recognize like what is your largest sphere of influence that you can have, or that you have in this world, and then like strive to make change at that level. Like, you don't need to try to save the entire world, but also don't constrict yourself to like, well, maybe I'll just like force my one friend to become vegan, and that will be it. And then I'm just going to spend my entire life forcing that friend to be vegan.
You know what Simone talked about today that was interesting and valid to what you're saying? Is she was talking about like the shame associated with climate activism, and like the shame associated with making individuals feel like it's their fault. and I know this is a confusing conversation now because I'm saying like, oh, it's all the consumers. The consumers do matter. But also, it's like not our responsibility to fix everything. What was the example you used earlier at the hotel?
I should have looked it up to make sure I got this right. But basically, a lot of the campaign around like don't litter and recycle started because the oil and natural gas industry was trying to push the blame away from themselves, and themselves being like they are the ones that manufactured all of these plastic bottles. They are the ones that are putting gasolines in the stations to fill up our cars. Like they are the ones that are manufacturing these products. But they, instead of taking responsibility for that and investing in the systems to capture these materials that they just sent out to pollute the planet, they created a marketing campaign to make consumers feel like it was their fault that the planet was being polluted because they didn't put their bottle in the right place.
Sure.
Like it's not. It's still a choice that we make to buy like a plastic bottle when we're out and just need water quickly.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like we're not the ones who made that, who manufactured that bottle. We're not the ones who like went and bottled water somewhere. Also, just to be clear, like bottled water is not always cleaner than tap water. There are no standards around bottled water, and in good cities there are standards around the quality of clean water, especially in the US. So do with that as you will. But yeah, there's been plenty of like corporate marketing campaigns throughout our history that have tried to put blame and shame on consumers in order to avoid taking responsibility for the mess that industry has created.
And then Simone was talking about how there's so much shit. She used veganism as an example. She was like there's so much shame and like if you're not vegan you don't care, and whatever. And the thing that Kayla said at our panel that we say at Alveus all the time is it's not about a couple people being 100% better. It's about a ton of people being percentage points better. You don't have to be vegan to be trying to be better. Awesome if you are, but you don't have to be vegan to be trying to be better. You could just reduce your meat consumption. There was a statistic that Shruti said, I wish I remembered it. I'm not going to try to repeat it because I'm going to repeat it wrong. But she said a statistic about the amount that we need to reduce our meat consumption individually to make this for this reduction in emissions in the US. And it was not 100% for everybody. That's an interesting point too. We've talked a lot about climate doomerism and climate optimism. I think, despite being a pretty negative person naturally, I would still say that I'm a climate optimist. I definitely don't feel super duper doomery, despite some of the things that I've heard today.